Hi, Denny Johnson here, and I'm with Ellen Tart-Jensen, and Ellen is a dear friend who has come to participate in an interview and to ask some questions that she would like to clarify that others might benefit from our discussion. We're going to go back and forth on this. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Denny. So, as having been a practitioner for 25 years, working with people, counseling with people, I would like us to talk about some of the causes of pain and suffering in the world, which are both emotional and physical. And I'd like us to clarify some of the sources of that pain and explain your understanding of the law of compensation.
Wow. Okay. Pain is the direct result of what is called the law of compensation. That means that the law of compensation, by the way, is another way of saying cause-effect. That there is a result or a consequence of the choices that we make. This is a direct feedback system to the person, which can be, by the way, very physiological or emotional. It can have many different layers to it, and sometimes it can take a long time to accumulate, because one of the advantages of being in the body is the amount of time we have to change our mind. So the law of compensation is, in some ways, some people call it like the law of karma in a way, except karma refers to multiple lifetimes of possibilities, right? Law of compensation is a direct feedback loop right now that says, if I'm in pain somewhere, anywhere in my body, then I'm continuously doing something that's causing the pain. Pain is an indication, like a friend, of being able to guide us to what we're doing. Now, what I'm referring to is that anytime I'm doing something outside the condition of love, because the law of compensation is basically a law that operates within love. Now, this is just my experience and comprehension of this law. There are others that I consider to be better. If you want a better view of this, perhaps you might go to the Divine Truth website, where the law of compensation is discussed much more thoroughly. This is my experience of it. This law of love operates so that any time, knowingly or unknowingly, we do something that's outside love, there is a way that we build up a physical reaction called pain and suffering. That's the only time it occurs. This is the automatic feedback system.
So does this stem from internal thoughts and emotions?
It stems from anything that is the continuous process of transmitting something. That means by a word or an emotion or an action or a gesture or a continual process. It could be something about relationships, it could be something about diet, that we're doing something that's damaging to us in some form or another, that we are transmitting in such a way that it either is transmitted toward ourselves, which is damaging, or it's transmitted toward someone else, and if it's unloving, it is an automatic feedback system that produces the pain and suffering. Sometimes where it is, how much it hurts, when did it begin, these can be sometimes clues that we can use to understand what it is that's affecting us.
So to go to where it began, because many people have this going on in their lives, and they really don't know that it's going on. And they have a severe illness or a severe emotional problem, and they don't know how to take responsibility for it, or that it's coming from within them and compensating and coming back around and creating problems in the body. So how can we help people to understand how to go within themselves, or to understand where this is coming from in order to change it?
Well, this is at the very heart of the question. And part of it is, just the beginning of the consideration that it is an issue that comes from inside rather than outside. The first step is the slight opening of the acceptance of responsibility, that even the possibility to consider that this pain I'm having right now is not just the result of something that I ate or something that happened to me, or some accident I had, or some environmental influence. Because the most common experience with pain, suffering, or disease is people want to blame something else.
Right.
And in some ways, we do have a something else to blame a little bit. Because a great deal of these triggers that happen in the body, or the emotions to produce pain and suffering, these triggers, they did arrive with the conception of the individual, meaning they arrived from the ancestors. So the ancestors have transmitted something which is now fairly well understood in science, called epigenetics,
Right.
which is where these tags, they travel along with the genetic code to produce the opportunity for like a hair trigger setting on the gene. What that means is that the emotional stressors in the ancestors now set up kind of a twitchy reaction to a emotional or physical condition. So if I have this epigenetic molecule on my genetic code, and then I engage in the experience of the emotion that's similar to the stress that actually created this epigenetic molecule, then I will trigger a physical experience that either my body is attacked by itself, or my body allows something to attack me. For example, there may be a cancer that my body starts, but it's well understood that everybody has cancer cells operating within them all the time. It's just that my immune system will choose to allow that to occur in a specific gland, organ, or body system.
And in a way, that's the body giving us a sign to tell us that something's off within us, to help let us know that there's something that we need to work on. But most people would like to know, how do I get to that? How do I work on that?
I think the beginning for me is to begin to at least feel and to comprehend the laws about how it arrives.
Right.
So that we can be more harmonious with the law, and to be able to actually use higher laws to be able to supersede the law of like cause effect. There is a law of love or forgiveness we might be able to use if we choose to apply it with our own free will.
So for example, a little child has cancer at 3 or 4 years old, and perhaps there was an epigenetic code that created that cancer from some of the grandparents, and the child is too young to understand. So perhaps the parents could say a prayer for the child.
Well, here's where the law and the acceptance of the responsibility begins to arrive. For children under 8, virtually every form of physical condition that reveals itself at that age is the direct result of feelings within the parents triggering that condition. Now, the child may have the epigenetic molecule that pre-orients them to the possibility of having that disease, but it must be triggered by an emotion that corresponds to that position. In order for it to happen in children, that's usually the parents. It can be a grandparent or somebody else living around them, but it's usually the parents who are responsible for how the child is responding in this moment.
So there again, if the parent works on themselves and says a prayer for the child and the healing for wherever the code came from, that could help to heal the situation within that family.
Yes, anytime a parent or substantial guardian, because there could be just a guardian in the environment, because that child is very sensitive to whoever is around them. It could be a grandparent, it could actually be a friend or somebody living with them. So whenever there is a responsible environment for the parents or the guardians to accept the responsibility that they are involved in the process of this continuation of this characteristic. Now that is a giant leap for some parents.
Yes.
To see a childhood
Oh, yes.
difficulty that would have anything to do with their own unresolved emotions about their own families.
Right.
Now, the harder task is that there is for me, a series of layers to this. The deepest layer in this is what we received as an epigenetic marker at conception, which personally, my feeling about this is mostly revealed in the iris. Those are markers that what we began with. Then there are those markers that arrive basically by two other methods that aren't necessarily in the iris all the time, and that is the experience of what happens from conception to birth, and then what happens from conception to 8. Those layers, they overlay each other, so the patterns that happen at conception to birth, they're very deeply involved in the deepest form of wiring about how the system is going to respond. What I mean by that is that oftentimes emotional difficulties or fears in the parents are already starting these targeted patterns of emotional reactions to facial recognition, to sounds, to smells, to touch. The child now begins to assimilate all of these. Now the next part is roughly around the age of 3, somewhere, my understanding, between 3 and 4, the child now chooses to respond to the environment. That response, even at that early age, triggered by some of the emotional patterns they already received in the ancestry and since birth in some way, or since gestation, the children actually have a free will response to their parents to become angry or reactive or self-repressive in some way, suppressive. Their own emotions are channeled inward. The child begins to make choices.
Right.
These choices, particularly between 3 and 7, but very much between 3 and 8 in that whole process, now this triggers a free will law of compensation coming back to the child.
Right.
The conditions generally under 3 are a law of compensation for the parents,
Okay.
who their behavior now triggered that within the child. You know, that's what's remarkable about it. There's layers of this responsibility. So how do we begin to be engaged in the process of changing this?
So Denny, you've worked out a very wonderful system of the family tree between the child, the parents, and the grandparents, and the great-grandparents. And also, you have worked out the system with the children and the firstborn, secondborn, all the way to the sixthborn. If we can look at the children and understand which grandparent might be affecting them as well, can the parents say a prayer for the way that came down through the family line to affect that child?
You know, Ellen, there are endless possibilities and choices. And there's a lot I need to learn, find, practice, test, explore in this.
Well, we're all learning, and you have so many things that you have written about and taught about, and they seem to be coming upon keys that could help us with these things.
If I had to, and I am in the process of doing it for myself, or if I had a child in a condition like that, the first thing that I need to do is pause for a moment. I mean, literally almost take a breath and ask sincerely, what would be my intention to do this?
Right.
Because part of that is that what my intention is a very deep personal experience that links my heart to my own soul. And I have to be honest enough to go back and say, okay, am I wanting to change this condition because I'm afraid of pain and suffering, or I'm angry with myself about this condition happening, or I'm worried about the finances of paying for this, and what is my true reason for wanting to do this?
Or I feel sorry for the child and I want to see them well.
Is it my guilt? I wish I was a better
Right.
parent. You know,
So
what
we
is
need to
it?
search our souls and
It
see
is.
where this is coming from.
Part of the reason that I need to get to this point is, okay, if I begin the process of accepting the responsibility for this condition, I'll recognize that the law of compensation leads to another issue, and that's called the law of attraction. I have attracted this event because it is a compensation or a consequence of the things I have chosen. So I have to sincerely look at my choices. And as I'm looking at my choices, why do I want to change? Is it because I'm afraid of death? I don't want to be a failure as a parent? What is my sincere reason for wanting to do this?
Right.
Because that begins to change everything about what I'm doing. If it's an unloving intention, like I'm afraid of failure, then my responses and things that happen are not going to be effective.
Right.
If it's a sincere, loving intention for what I want to do for myself that's affecting my child, and quite possibly and quite realistically affecting future generations, why would I want to do that honestly?
So the law of compensation and the law of attraction requires us to go within and see if it's coming from a loving place. Because otherwise we're attracting more unloving types of things.
That's correct. So if I'm in a situation where I'm having a pain and suffering in myself or my child, then I have to accept the responsibility to examine what I'm doing honestly, because sometimes I'm not even aware of the fact that I'm engaged in unloving avoidance of responsibility.
Right. And that shines such a ray of light, I think, for parents if they can understand this, so they don't have to have blame, they don't have to have guilt, they don't have to have shame. It gives them an opportunity to realize, hey, I can stop and look within myself and make change here.
Well, for me, that the primary intention for doing that would be to improve the condition of love within myself and my child and my family and my community and the greater world around me. Am I doing this for genuinely loving reasons?
Exactly.
Then in the process of doing this, recognizing that there are certain laws about how the conception brought me the ancestral tags, and the gestation process and the subsequent to birth process, they brought me more, and I'm involved in all of this, and they're all woven together.
Right.
And now they're displaying to me that I might be involved in some form of habitual, unloving retention of a belief system.
Right.
So I have to begin to respond to what that is. So I think that this is probably a good place for us to take a moment, take a break, and come back and then begin to discuss more of what that looks like. So this is really the beginning of accepting the responsibility that there is a law of compensation issue, bringing me something to examine, and I'm choosing to accept the responsibility then to look for the answers and accept the laws that are operating on my behalf as loving experiences coming at me, because it's designed to increase my awareness, increase my capacity to feel, and bring me closer to be in harmony with divine love.
Okay.
That's the first start.
Awesome.
Let's do that much and
Yay.
we'll come back.
Okay.